All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of Essential Essence 20. Join me as we look at the features, focuses, powers, and perks of the Essence 20 system to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today, we are going to be looking at the speedy morale boosting powerhouse of the Ranger team, the Yellow Ranger. As a quick reminder, if you do enjoy this stuff, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All those things are super important. Now, let's talk about this. So, the Yellow Ranger. The Yellow Ranger is interesting for a number of reasons historically in this series. First things first, the Yellow Ranger is in Super Sentai. The Yellow Ranger was primarily a male ranger that every so often had a female of a version of it. But for the most part, Yellow Rangers were dudes. In Mighty Morphin, Yellow Rangers are primarily female, with every so often us getting a male Yellow Ranger like Ninja Storm or Mystic Force, but primarily they tend to be female Rangers. And the interesting thing about it, I've mentioned before, like, I'm not a huge fan of the fact that they tied your role, effectively your class in Essence 20, to your spectrum color, because I don't think the way that they tied those colors to mechanics in the Essence 20 is accurate to how they work in Power Rangers in general. But one of the reasons they did that is each spectrum color does tend to gravitate towards particular attributes in the wielder. So things like Red Rangers are leaders. It's almost exclusive that Red Rangers will be a leader of the Power Rangers, no matter what. To the point where in Cosmic Fury, the Pink Ranger was effectively upgraded or promoted to Red Ranger because when their Red Ranger was not there, because he'd become beige, she just naturally stepped into the role and started taking a leadership position. And so the color spectrum kind of figured that, and she became the Red Ranger because she was a leader. So I understand kind of the thought process behind it. But the thing that makes it really interesting when we're talking about the Yellow Ranger is Yellow Rangers in Sentai are very different characters than Yellow Rangers and Power Rangers. Because, again, a lot of male Yellow Rangers are turned into female Yellow Rangers in Power Rangers. The first Yellow Ranger was Trini in Power Rangers, but the Yellow Ranger for... the Yellow Ranger for Zyuranger, which was the Super Sentai series that they use all the suit footage from, was Dime Tribe Knight Boy? I think that's how you pronounce his name. It's you could easily pronounce it Boy as well. But so right from the beginning of Power Rangers, we already had the kind of version of male Yellow Rangers turning into female Yellow Rangers over here. And it also meant that Trini was a very different character than Bowie. Bowie was a bit more kind of comic relief, and was also known as the powerhouse. Bowie was an incredibly strong Ranger. He was also the youngest of the Rangers, which is something I was unaware of until I was doing my research for this. So he was kind of the kid of the group, and he was the strongest. And that's something that is typical of Sentai Yellow Rangers, is they tend to be the powerhouses. They tend to be the strongest characters on their team. When we look at Power Rangers, the Yellow Ranger tends to be the morale booster and the kind of heart of the team. They tend to be kind of ethical. When you look at Trini's role, a lot of times she was there to support the other characters. Like she worked with Billy a lot to help him build his confidence, and to kind of help improve his ability to fight while out of the suit. Because especially season 1, Billy, he had almost no ability to protect himself. And Jason did teach him a little bit of martial arts, but Trini was generally there to be very supportive in things. And that's kind of what we tend to see with a lot of Yellow Rangers in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Is they tend to be there for support. They tend to be the kind of emotional power boosting style characters over and over and over and over and over again. So I've always found that very interesting that the Sentai version of the Yellow Ranger is this super strong, and they also have a history of being associated with food, despite the fact that there's technically only been 2 really food obsessed Rangers for Super Sentai. But a lot of Yellow Rangers do have, like, technically Bowie from Zyuranger was not considered quote-unquote food obsessed, but he did eat more than anyone else on the team, and he also hated carrots. So food was a large part of his character. Food doesn't really become a thing in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers for probably a lot of different reasons. But making... we just won't go there. So yeah, you know, I find it interesting that Yellow Rangers in general have this very kind of different core focus when you're looking at Super Sentai versus Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, whereas other ones are significantly more streamlined. Again, Red Rangers are Red Rangers are Red Rangers. Pink Rangers are very, very similar across the across Power Rangers and Super Sentai. They tend to have very similar things, but the Yellow Ranger is very different across the two. So anyway, looking at the Yellow Ranger as it works in the Essence20 system, there's nothing really here that's really morale boosting or anything. My nickname for the Yellow Ranger is the Speedster, because a lot of their features and role perks are focused around speed in some way, either making the character faster or giving them extra attacks, or like everything is really kind of built around speed and agility and things like that. Their speed score is their highest score and everything. So that's why I call it the Speedster. I'm not particularly fond of the name the Speedster, because unlike the rest of the names that I gave for the colors, I don't think it's quite as good a description. Because if you think that all this role does is it does fast stuff, you're going to be missing out on quite a few of the other things that it does. So if you guys have a better idea for a name for the Yellow Ranger, I'd love to hear it in the comments down below. But that being said, let's start talking about mechanics and stuff like that. So moving on. Let's talk about the Spectrum role features. So the first thing we always talk about, personal power capacity. The Yellow Ranger is a medium power character, meaning they regain 3 personal power per day. They start at 2. They eventually get up to a maximum capacity of 11 personal power. So they are going to be able to use more grid perks and other things that require personal power than, let's say, it's one of the other slow ones. I think that's the Red Ranger is one of the slow ones. Yeah. So then, say a Red Ranger, but they're not going to be able to go crazy like, say, like a Blue Ranger could. But when we look at the features and everything like that, we're going to see that the Yellow Ranger has a lot of different abilities that use their personal power compared to other classes that have very, very few, or other roles that have very, very few built into the role itself. So even though they do get more personal power than a few of the other roles, a lot of that personal power, if you want to get the most out of the role itself, a lot of that's going to be reserved for using the abilities built into the role itself. So it's interesting in and of itself. As far as training is concerned, they only get light armor, so this is another one where their toughness defense is going to be relatively low. But as we said before, their highest essence score increase is their speed. So they're probably not going to be using their toughness defense very often unless they're forced to. As far as essence scores in general, speed is their number one highest essence score as far as increases are concerned, followed by smarts. And then we have strength in third place and social being in fourth place, which is another one that I find kind of interesting because, again, when we look at Yellow Rangers across both of them, they have kind of different focuses. The Yellow Rangers in Sentai are meant to be big, powerful guys, and then the Yellow Rangers in Power Rangers are meant to be kind of the morale boosters and stuff like that. Both sides do tend to have an effect on their fellow Rangers, whether from being strong, or another thing that tends to be really common with male Yellow Rangers in Sentai is they are comic relief. And so the idea that the morale boosters, and they even describe the Yellow Ranger as soul of the team, the fact that their social score is their least increased one, I find really interesting. And again, it's one of the reasons why I'm not a huge fan of them tying the spectrum color to your role. Because, again, in this one, I think they get it wrong. Yes, quite a few Yellow Rangers are somewhat speedy, but it's just as often that they're not speedy at all, that they're very kind of deliberate and forceful in their I mean, look at like Hyperforce Yellow was played by Paul Schreier, who was Bulk in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and he uses a hammer for his weapon. And most of the Yellow Rangers are going to have, specifically the male ones, are going to have a little bit more of a kind of strength-based focus. So yeah, the idea that they've mechanically, I don't have a problem with the mechanics, but tying the mechanics specifically to the Yellow Ranger is just weird and short-sighted. So that's for the most part, that's the Spectrum role features. One thing that is kind of unique about the Yellow Ranger, we don't generally talk about the grid equipment because it's the same thing. You get a wrist communicator, you get a power morpher, you get a blade blaster, and then you get some version of a power weapon. The unique thing about the Yellow Ranger is they get 2 light power weapons. They're the only Ranger that, as part of their grid equipment, they get 2 weapons instead of 1. And that's basically meant to... it's meant to work with their table perk that we'll be talking about in a little bit. So... yeah, they are the dual wielding class effectively. So, moving on. At first level. Sorry, I had something on my lip. I thought I had like a hair or something. Let's try this one more time. At first level, you get 2 things. One is it's Morphin time. It's the same as everywhere else. If you want to know what you get in more specifics, go watch my Black Ranger roll where I talk about everything about its Morphin time. But the very basics, you get a toughness bonus, your jump distance is bigger, you can call a power weapon as a free action, and you can demorph when you hit 0. I go into more details in the Black Ranger roll, so watch it there. However, the other ability you get at first level is called Triple Strike Attacks. Now, this is what I refer to as a table perk or a table feature. And the reason why, there is a way to kind of sort of multi-class in the Essence20 system. for Power Rangers particularly. There's a general perk that you can take that basically allows you to take a feature or a role perk from another role. But the limitation on that is you can't take a feature that references an ability that is listed on the table for that role. So for that reason, I call these table perks or table features, and they are intrinsically linked to this class. In D&D 5th edition, I would refer to these as defining features. So Triple Strike Attacks is the table feature or the table perk for this. And it's kind of an interesting one. You can, whenever you make a finesse attack action, spend a personal power to make an attack with each of your hands at no penalty, and then make a third follow-up martial arts attack at a target of one of the previous strikes. This follow-up attack, often a kick, elbow, or headbutt, has a variable skill die based on your Yellow Ranger level, shown in the table above. So, Triple Strike Attack is Flurry of Blows. The Yellow Ranger does a lot of the stuff that monks do in 5th edition. To the point where, for anyone that doesn't know, the original Power Rangers RPG, when Renegade first got the license for it, was going to be a 5th edition conversion. They were going to use the SRD for 5th edition and just make their own classes and stuff like that to make the Power Rangers role-playing game. As they were making it, they realized that it would be better if they just made their own system, and thus Essence20 was born. But you can see remnants of 5th edition in there, and the Yellow Ranger feels a lot like a monk. Now, for anyone that doesn't know, I am a monk main. I love monks. I love them in D&D. My first D&D 5th edition character that I played for any length of time was a monk. I played them in the Adventures League, and I played them all the way from 5th level all the way up to 17th level. And loved it so much. It's still one of my favorite characters I've ever played, and one day I will bring that character back for something, because boy, did I love that character. That being said, the Triple Strike Attacks is effectively Flurry of Blows. If you're familiar with just monks in general, they've always had this ability called Flurry of Blows, which was basically they could make extra attacks, and they generally had to be unarmed attacks. At least the extra ones did. And that's basically what this is. But because of how the Essence20 system works, it is a very unique way to do this. So there's a bunch of caveats on this. It has to be a finesse attack action. Okay, so we're already limiting it. You can make an attack with each of your hands, so it requires you effectively to dual wield, which dual wielding in Essence20 is not nearly as powerful as it is in literally any other tabletop RPG. It's just kind of something you do, but you generally don't get extra attacks or anything. So this is effectively giving them extra attacks, and then you make a third follow-up martial arts attack at a target of one of the previous strikes. Now, the interesting thing about the Triple Strike Attacks, first of all, it doesn't tell you what the third attack does. I'm sure they've clarified it somewhere else, but it doesn't specifically say this attack does 1 damage or something like that. It just says you do another attack, and it's a martial arts attack. And if you look at... because martial arts in the Power Rangers RPG is a trait. It is not a weapon type. And I'm going to... I want to look it up specifically, so... Maybe it's not. Maybe in this one it is. Brawling Strike. No. Might... Description of range effects, alternate effects. Do they not have... There it is. Yeah, so martial arts is a trait. I don't know why I can't find the martial arts trait. Multiple target martial maneuvering, weapon effects, and traits. Why is this so hard? It doesn't list martial arts in its effects. It lists martial arts as a trait, but it doesn't... There's so many things wrong with the... But anyway, so martial arts is a trait. It is not a weapon type. So, like, both brawling and strike, which are basically unarmed attacks, are listed on the weapons table, and they both do stun 1 damage. Or they can do blunt 1 damage, but there's a downshift that you have to deal with. So they don't actually say in the Yellow Ranger thing how much damage it does. But I assume they want you to treat it as a strike attack, which is the finesse-based unarmed strike, which means it either does stun 1 damage, or if you take a downshift to it, it'll just do 1 blunt damage, which is perfectly fine. Because of this, this means that unlike literally every other ranger, at first level, the Yellow Ranger can make 3 attacks. Now, those 3 attacks can only hit 2 different targets, because they do specifically say at a target of 1 of the previous strikes. So you can hit 2 different targets, but your 3rd attack on triple strike attack has to hit 1 of the targets that you've already hit. So if you're fighting like putties and stuff like that, and each one has 1 hit point or whatever, triple strike attack is still going to be useful because you're getting 2 attacks instead of 1, but you're going to waste 1 of the attacks because it has to hit a target that you've already hit. However, if you're fighting, your monster of the week, this means that the Yellow Ranger can make more attacks than any other character in the game right at level 1. And that's a big deal. And another thing about this in particular, it doesn't specifically say that this is only something you can use in your morphed form. So this is something that can happen when you're unmorphed as well. So that in and of itself makes the Yellow Ranger a very powerful damage dealing character. Even if they are only using kind of unarmed strike attacks, that means that they can do effectively stun 3 in a single turn. And the way that stun damage works is effectively when you get hit by a stun attack, when your turn comes around, you don't get to do anything, but one of the stun effects goes away. So basically for each level of stun, you miss a turn. The other thing that happens with stun attacks is if your stuns stack to the point where they equal your hit points, you're taken out of combat. So it's kind of like regenerating damage. Because if you can do enough stun damage to actually take a target out, it works just the exact same as normal damage. You can still take a target out by just stunning them to death, but it also removes their ability to take actions for as long as the stun keeps going on. So stun can be very, very powerful. And so with the fact that normal unarmed attacks, their default ability is just doing stun damage, the Yellow Ranger can be kind of a stunning machine where they can start putting out at least 2 different characters. They can stun them into an inability to act. Or they can just load stun on a single character and have it just keep going and stun lock them for a long time, which is one of the things that 5th edition monks are known for. It's one of the things I believe they're changing in 5.5 because one of the playtests that came out like last year or so showed them changing the stunning fist ability so that it only happens once per turn. That wouldn't happen with the Yellow Ranger here. They can just keep doing stun attacks and doing a lot. Now, it is limited by personal power, but still, there's a lot of different ways to get your personal power back. Obviously, you get some every day, but you can also spend story points for the whole team to get personal power. There are certain role features that give you additional personal power, and there's actual things in the story that might just regain you some personal power. So that's going to be one of the things that the Yellow Ranger wants to focus on, is understanding when this triple strike attack is going to be the most useful. and whether you want to split your attacks or focus them entirely, but you have more attacks than literally anybody else. So that can be incredibly useful. So, yeah. The interesting thing about it, the damage doesn't change, but it has a variable skill die. So normally, for your other two attacks, you're going to be using whatever your finesse skill is for your attack rolls. For Triple Strike's attacks, the follow-up attack starts as a D2 and eventually gets up to a D10. Now, there's nothing in here that says that it can't benefit from upshifts or downshifts or anything like that. So you can still use upshifts in order to be able to get more things. The only other thing in here is there's nothing about the idea of like a specialization. But if you specifically choose a specialization in martial arts, because this is particularly a martial arts attack, that would mean that your specialization would count, and that would also mean that your follow-up attack would gain the benefit of specialization. So as your follow-up attack skill die gets higher and higher, you get to roll more and more dice and pick the one that gives you the best results. So, yeah, you'll definitely want, because Triple Strike attacks is such an intrinsic part of the character, you will definitely want to consider getting a martial arts specialization either right at level 1 or very soon after, because you will be using it a ton. Moving on. At second level, you get 2 different abilities, the first of which is Nimble Fighter. After each successful melee attack, you may immediately move 5 feet in any viable direction. This movement is free and additional to any other movement you might make during your turn. So this is the other kind of monk feature, but it works very, very different than your standard monk super speed, effectively. Every time, and they do this, after each successful melee attack, you may immediately move 5 feet in any viable direction. So you do have to hit, which again means that investing in finesse, which is what most of your melee attacks are going to be, because in order to take advantage of Triple Strike attacks, they need to be finesse based. So investing in finesse early is going to be very, very useful, because every time you hit, you get an additional 5 feet of movement. Now, it does say you may immediately move 5 feet. So this isn't something like, well, I attacked 3 times and they were all hits, so that I get an extra 15 feet of movement, right? No. The second you hit, you have to move. But it does mean that if you want to kind of embody that character that kind of runs through combat and just goes pow, 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 and just kind of runs through a group of enemies, kind of like there's when the Gold Ranger is first introduced in in Power Rangers Zeo. One of the things he does, he goes, "It's time for a gold rush!" And he takes his staff out, and then you see it kind of glow, and he goes, "Shoo!" And he just runs through and hits a bunch of people. He doesn't punch them, he just runs through them. But it's one of my favorite things ever. I love the Gold Ranger. The Zeo Gold Ranger is such a cool character. They're one of my favorite characters ever. I think they're just amazing. So that being said, Nimble Fighter basically gives you that ability of, I can move in, make an attack, and then continue going. And because this is in addition to any other movement that you make, once you make that 5 feet of movement, you can continue moving if you're not close enough to hit another target, or you can just hit another target and move again. But it doesn't drain your normal movement amount. So it is very much designed to be something where you kind of weave between the bad guys. Now, there are no like opportunity attacks, as far as I'm aware, in the Essence20 system. So you don't have to worry about, You don't have to worry about this causing you to get a bunch of extra attacks or anything like that. And again, to get the most out of this, you generally want to be using it either when there's a few enemies that are relatively close together, or understanding that when you get close to an enemy, hit them, get your 5-foot boost, and then keep moving. You can effectively use this to extend your movement speed to get to the target you really want. Something that's really common in just Power Rangers in general is the monster of the week will come with a bunch of minion creatures, putties or tengus or something like that. And they will use the minions to kind of trap all but one of the rangers away, so they can kind of one-on-one one of the rangers. And so with Nimble Fighter, you can effectively use that against your opponent if that's one of the tactics that they're deciding to use. In tabletop RPGs, it's actually extremely common for ranged characters in general, especially casters, to have a bunch of characters in front of them that are basically blocking the players from getting to the caster, so that the caster can just rain down damage on them, and they have to deal with these tougher characters in the front first. Using Nimble Fighter to get through a group of enemies very, very quickly can be a really, really effective method of ensuring that, especially if you're dealing with a ranged monster of the week or something similar to that, that you're going to be able to keep them from being able to do too many bad things to your team without being able to retaliate or react to it. And also, as I've mentioned before, if every single combat encounter, the only thing that you have to do in the combat encounter is whittle their hit points down to 0, you will have a very, very boring game. You need to have other things happening in combat. And so with Nimble Fighter just giving you additional movement, you can basically use enemies to kind of leapfrog over them to get to things that you need to do. Like, for example, monsters are attacking the power plant and they're trying to destroy some of the transformers so that the city loses power. Well, you have to stop them, but there's all these little minions there. So you can basically use the minions to bop one 5 feet extra movement, move some more, bop another one, extra 5 feet of movement, and you just kind of keep going and moving to be able to get to the target that you really want, which is to save the transformer. And by transformer, I don't mean robot in disguise. I mean electrical transformer that changes DC to AC or AC to DC, or plays really cool heavy metal rock music. My knowledge of electrical engineering is limited entirely to music, apparently. So, yeah, that's Nimble Fighter. Moving on. Also at 2nd level, you get Strike bonus. You're able to infuse your Morphin Grid power into melee attacks while morphed. So this one specifically does require you to be morphed. At the beginning of any round, you may spend 1 personal power to apply a shift to the first melee attack you make during your action. And the shift gets higher as you reach higher levels. You guys will notice that I will be kind of vague about certain things. That is entirely based on my own fear that someone could use one of these videos to basically avoid having to buy the book. So I will leave specific aspects out to encourage you guys to go buy the books. They're great books. Well, most of them are great books. This book needs a reprinting. But the system itself is awesome. The people over at Renegade have been nothing but kind to me. So, yeah. So, strike bonus. Again, this is your second thing that you can use personal power for in the first to 2 levels. So, the Yellow Ranger role has a lot of things that allow them to use personal power right from level 1. And this one is interesting. When this is something that we haven't mentioned in here before, but there's an I'm going to try this one more time. There's an economic principle called opportunity cost. And basically what opportunity cost is effectively the idea that monetary cost is not the only thing, or even the primary thing that a lot of people think about when they're making decisions. One of the things that they will generally consider was what's called opportunity cost, which is effectively, if I do this, what can't I do because I'm doing this? The example that was given to me in one of my textbooks was you have a fast food restaurant and you can make shakes and you can make burgers. Making a shake takes about, to use easy numbers, takes 5 minutes to make a shake. From beginning to end, takes 5 minutes. However, making a burger takes 10 minutes. So, when you are staffing your store and you're trying to tell your associates what to do, you have to kind of gauge, well, which is going to be more useful for me? Because a burger costs me 2 shakes. In the time that it takes one employee to make one burger, they could have made 2 shakes. So that's what opportunity cost is. They're not specifically going, well, a burger's worth $5 to me and a shake is worth $3 to me, so how much money? Opportunity cost is just literally translating specific things. Poor people, like I have been for most of my life, learn to use opportunity cost in a particular way, which is the idea of meals. I don't know how many people do this that watch my channel, but this was something that I kind of grew up with because we've always been poor. Was the idea that when we went shopping, we were looking for so many meals. And basically what that was we knew that we were only going to be able to go shopping once a week, and we had set amount of money. That money had to feed the family so many times. And so we would just break that down into meals, and we had to make whatever amount of money we had translate into, if it was a week, we would have to translate that into either 14 or 21 meals, depending on whether or not we were in school. Because if we were in school, we could if we were in school, we could get breakfast. A lot of times we got both breakfast and lunch at school, so we only had to have 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We only had to have 11 meals on a school week. But that was another idea of kind of an opportunity cost. We weren't really measuring things by dollar amounts. We were measuring it by activities. This is a meal. And that's what we're looking at when we're looking at strike bonus. Because in order to, at level 1, you only get a single upshift. So a single upshift worth 3 attacks, from an opportunity cost standpoint. Or I guess 2 additional attacks. So is a single upshift worth 2 attacks? It really isn't. Now, as strike bonus gets higher and you start getting higher upshifts and you're starting to build your character, maybe you're building a crit fishing style character, which in Essence20 is a completely viable thing when you deal with the things like specialization and stuff like that. It becomes a very, very viable option to try and fish for critical hits. So strike bonus, whenever you're dealing with specialization, upshifts are a major, major benefit, because in addition to just simply giving you a bigger die to roll, you also have an additional die you get to roll. And the way that critical hits work in the Essence20 system is, other than the D2, if your skill die rolls the highest number it possibly can, that counts, and the attack hits, it counts as a critical success. When you're specialized, you roll every single die, including the die you normally roll, and you get to pick whichever one is highest to use that as your skill die roll. But if any one of those dice rolls the maximum amount, even if you're not using that one, like let's say you've got a D10 for your skill dice, you're rolling a D2, a D4, a D6, a D8, and a D10. And the D2 you get a 1, the D4 you get a 4 on, the D6 you get a 5 on, the D8 you get a 3 on, and the D10 you get a 7 on. We're going to use the D10 because it gave you a 7, and that's the highest number. However, because the D4 rolled a 4, that would still count as a critical hit. So At second level, when you get strike bonus, it's really not that great. In general, it's almost always going to be more beneficial for you to get 2 additional attacks than it's going to be for you to be able to have 1 attack that just has a single upshift on it. The only time that's going to change is if you're fighting a character that has a really high defense score, whichever defense that you have to go against it. Strike bonus might be worth it to be able to get hits if you're having a really, really hard time getting hits. But from a statistical standpoint, being able to roll 3 times instead of 1 time with a slightly higher number is always going to be more beneficial. You will probably almost always get more hits from triple strike attacks than you will get from strike bonus at second level. It's an interesting idea, and again, it does eventually get to the point where it is really useful. Like eventually your strike bonus eventually gets up to a 4 upshift. So by the time that happens, upshift 4, if you have a really high number, or if you have a really high skill die already, I'm going to really quick go to, I need to see the dice ladder thing. Where are you, dice ladder? All right, so if you have a D12, 4 upshifts brings you to automatic critical success. If you have a D10, 4 upshifts brings you to an automatic success. So if you have a D10 in something and you can get another upshift from literally anything and then use that, you are auto-critting, which can be very, very useful. So as you can see, it does get better, but you do have to kind of build your character around that ability for it to get better. And right at second level, it's really not that useful. It's almost always going to be better to do triple strike attacks, especially since strike bonus, first of all, you have to be morphed, whereas triple strike attacks, you don't have to be. And it's only attack rolls. If strike bonus also worked on literally any other skill check, this might be something that was very, very useful in certain situations. But because this is a purely combat ability and you already have a combat ability that's just better, at second level, strike bonus is not useful. Again, as you level up, it gets significantly more useful. But right at second level, you can kind of forget it. Which, for me, I would say, because you're already getting Nimble Fighter at second level, and the Essence20 system in general does this with all of their roles, or at least in Power Rangers, they heavy load them in the lower levels, where first level you'll get, at least 2 different abilities. Second level, you'll get at least 2 different abilities. And you generally get almost all of your abilities by about 11th level. And then everything after that is just kind of upgrades to those abilities. So I think with this one, I think it would have been better to wait until a later level to introduce strike bonus, because you're really just never going to use it until your upshift is more than just 1. So, yeah. Moving on. At third level, you get a bunch of things that every single class gets. We're going to go over these pretty quickly, but we are going to spend a little bit of extra time on extra attack because it is a little bit different for the Yellow Ranger because of triple strike attacks. Third level, you get your Zords. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a giant robot animal, can turn into, most of them, can link up with other giant robot animals and turn into a giant humanoid animal robot thing. Anyway, Zords, you get Zord perks, stuff like that. Fourth level, you get general perks. They are effectively feats from 5th edition. 6th level, you get grid powers, which are more feats, but they're specifically tied to Power Ranger types stuff, whereas general perks are a little bit more varied. At 5th level, you get extra attack, which works the same way that extra attack works for most other characters. When you take the attack action, you can make 2 attacks instead of 1, and then eventually you can make 3 attacks instead of 1. However, with how triple strike attacks is worded, they had to put an additional addendum of this, and to me, this is poor writing. because there are better ways that they could have written this to have the same effect without having to put these little addendums and other things in there to make the game more confusing. But because on triple strike attacks they say you can, whenever you make a finesse attack action, spend a personal power to make an attack, blah, blah. That's how they phrased triple strike attack. So because extra attack allows you to make multiple finesse attack actions in the same turn, that would technically mean you could burn more power points to just turn all of those into triple strike attacks, which would be devastating. It would turn the Yellow Ranger into the yellow food processor as they just go through and just completely demolish everything in their path. So at the end of extra attack, they had to specifically put, additionally, the extra attacks are not split into multiple attacks by triple strike attacks roll perk. They're singular attacks added to the standard attack action. What they could have done to avoid that is just in triple strike attacks, you can, or once per turn, you can, when you make a finesse attack action, spend a personal. That's all they would have had is once per turn or once on your turn. If you want to be really, really specific, once on your turn, you can, when you make a finesse attack action, spend a personal power. That's literally once on your turn. It's 4 words, or once per turn, 3 words, instead of putting an entire additional sentence that's full of these weird words and everything like that. That to me is just bad writing. But that being said, again, as the Yellow Ranger gets higher, they get 3 attacks. One of those 3 attacks can turn into 3 attacks. So a grand total of 5 attacks that can be made in a single turn if you burn a single personal power. Meaning, again, this character can make more attack actions than the Red Ranger, which was effectively the fighter, which in 5th edition was one of their defining features is they make more attacks than everyone. Well, the Yellow Ranger can actually make more attacks than the Red Ranger, which again was one of the reasons why I had that speedster label added to it, because it is a kind of speed-based thing. So yeah, that's how extra attack works in this one. It's not monumentally crazy, but they did have to put that little caveat in there just to avoid people from completely abusing triple strike attacks. Because if you could turn all 3 attacks into triple strike attacks, that would mean you'd be able to make 9 attacks per turn. That's a bit of nonsense. So anyway, moving on. At 7th level, you get Exploit Weakness. You can, after making a melee attack against a target with augmented defenses of some kind, make a certain check. If successful, you and your teammates may ignore one of the target's defense bonuses, resistance, armor bonus, etc., with your attacks until the end of the scene. And then at a higher level, this ability allows you and your team to ignore all defense augmentative bonuses the target might possess. So, Exploit Weakness is interesting, to say the least. It's a way to get around resistance. So if you have a creature that's resistance to damage, Exploit Weakness not only gets rid of it for you, it gets rid of it for your whole team. And if they have anything like armor or something, Exploit Weakness effectively removes their armor for the remainder of the scene. So this is actually a really powerful ability, especially since nothing in here requires a limited resource. There's no limitation on this whatsoever. It doesn't say you can only use this once per turn. It doesn't say that you can only use this once per creature or anything like this. It's just after making a melee attack against a target with augmented defenses of some kind. So all it is you have to make a skill check. If you don't know which skill check it is, pick up the book. You just have to make a skill check, and as long as that skill check goes well, then you are able to deactivate that defense for your entire team until the end of the scene, which is basically the rest of combat. So, again, it's going to depend on what kind of enemies that you're fighting, but this can be really, really useful. And again, not just for yourself. And then when we also combine that with the fact that with extra attack and triple strike attacks, that means theoretically you could do this to 2 people from triple strike, and then if you get the maximum of 3, that would effectively be 4 different targets in a single turn. Because again, triple strike attacks, 2 of those attacks have to go against a single target. So yeah, this is either 4 different creatures you can just remove their defenses without spending additional resources. Like I said, the only time you'd have to spend resources is to do the triple strike attack. And if you're not using that, that means even when you get this at 2nd level, your extra attack gives you 2 attacks. Twice per turn, you can just remove defenses from targets for free. Like, that's a really, really big deal. It also means that you do need to, as the Yellow Ranger, you do need to be aware what you're facing. You need to be aware if they're wearing some kind of armor, or if your attacks aren't landing the way that you're expecting them to. This thing that augmented defense, if the creature doesn't have any armor, then exploit weakness is useless because there's no armor for it to remove. And if it doesn't have some kind of bolstered defense, there's no reason to use it. However, even if you use it on a creature that doesn't have any bolstered defenses, it doesn't cost you anything. It's just an additional roll. The worst that can happen is you get a fumble, which, again, worse things have happened. So, yeah, this is another one where I've talked about this before. The idea of good game design gives you choices. Bad game design gives you right answers. Exploit weakness is always the right answer. If you have not used exploit weakness on a creature that you hit, it is always the right answer to use exploit weakness. So this is just a feature of attack rolls with the character moving forward, is they always have this ability to exploit weakness. And to me, I would have preferred to see something here that actually gave you a choice instead of just automatically, because they say you can, which implies a choice, and there really isn't a choice. There's no downside to ever not doing exploit weakness other than you don't want to roll the check for it. So, yeah, it's a useful ability. I would have preferred to see something that actually forced you to choose whether or not you wanted to use it. But with how much power a Yellow Ranger is going to be using through triple strike attacks and then eventually strike bonus once it gets to the point where it's useful, linking this to personal power or something like that would not be fun, because then again you start running into opportunity cost. You know, is this worth 2 extra attacks? When there's no cost associated to it, there's no opportunity cost. It's just always a good idea. So yeah, moving on. At 9th level, you get Whirlwind Strike. You can, by expending 1 personal power while morphed, so they do specifically say this one only works while morphed, allow your attack actions melee attacks to target every enemy adjacent to you until the end of the round. You still only make a single attack roll, but they are applied equally among, or you still only make single attack rolls, but they are applied equally among all enemies adjacent to you, similar to an area of effect ranged attack. This is a bit of nonsense. When you combine this with Nimble Fighter, this can turn the Nimble Fighter and triple strike attacks. This can turn the Yellow Ranger into, again, that food processor, meat grinder nonsense. Basically, for a single personal power, until the end of the round, all of your attacks are area attacks. And that means including your triple strike attacks. There's nothing in here, there's no caveat or anything that says triple strike attacks don't work. So theoretically, with this, every single one of your melee attacks can hit every single character adjacent to you. So learning how to use Nimble Fighter to get as many characters adjacent as possible, or simply using Nimble Fighter to kind of switch between two areas to hit two groups of enemies as quickly as possible, is going to be the biggest benefit. Also, when we're talking about exploit weakness, again, you can, after making a melee attack against a target with augmented defense, this means that exploit weakness is now an area attack. This turns devastating. Like really, really powerful, devastating the thing where you are just taking... Resistances are not a thing when you have a Yellow Ranger on your team with both exploit weakness and Whirlwind Strike. Now, the one thing that's going to cause issues for you is if you can't group up enemies, Whirlwind Strike is useless. So either by choosing weapons that have the maneuverability that allows you to actually move them. By the way, both Brawl and Strike, which are your unarmed attacks, have the maneuver feature, so that allows you to maneuver a target when you use those attacks. I think you have to forego damage to use the maneuver, but still. So either you have to get good at using maneuver type weapons, or having another character on your team that can move enemies around to put them in a spot where you can just go to the middle and start Vegematicking these guys and just turning them into mush. So yeah, like it still costs a personal power. So again, there's a lot of things in the Yellow Ranger's kit that requires them to use personal power. And with them only being kind of a medium personal power, you are going to want to kind of watch how you use it. However, it still means for 2 personal power, you can hit theoretically 8 targets. If you were able to get right in the middle of 8 different creatures, if you're playing on a grid, you theoretically could use Whirlwind Strike and Triple Strike Attack to hit 9 creatures 5 times. So that's effectively making 45 attacks in a single turn. Nonsense, right? Now, the likelihood of you ever being able to pull that off is next to none. But it's very possible that you could get 3 or 4 characters close enough for you to be able to use Whirlwind Strike and Triple Strike attacks on them. And so even that, if you've got the maximum number of attacks and Triple Strike attack, 4 times 5, that's still 20 attacks effectively. So yeah, Whirlwind Strike does turn this character very, very fast and powerful. And again, it does kind of fit into that speedster thing of like cyclones and stuff like that. I mean, that's what you're going to be doing when you're making 5 attacks in a single round that are all like you are turning into Spinny Top Man. So yeah, moving on. At 13th level, you get Lightning Fast. By spending 1 personal power while morphed, instead of moving normally, you can instantly appear anywhere within 60 feet and line of sight of your current location. While this is treated like a miniature teleportation, you do actually sprint and or jump to reach this new location. It's just so fast, no one can see you doing so. You get a teleport ability. I like teleport abilities. I'm not a huge fan of just how much personal power the Yellow Ranger has to use, because this is another ability built into the role that requires you to use personal power. And again, you can have a maximum, at max level, you can have 11 personal power stored. However, you only get 3 personal power per day. So you can burn through your entire daily personal power in a single round if you use Triple Strike attacks, Whirlwind Strike, and Lightning Fast. And if you want to add on Strike bonus to that as well, that is 1 more than your daily allotment of personal power. That being said, teleporting is really, really useful. And especially since they specifically say you can jump, it does mean that you can go 60 feet straight up, or 60 feet across a gorge or river or something like that. Like, the only limitation to this is it says you do actually sprint or jump, so it doesn't mean that you can teleport through like a keyhole or something. Whereas an actual teleportation that only requires you to be able to see where you're going, you could do that. You can't teleport out of a jail or something using lightning fast because you can't get through the bars. It's still very, very useful. And 60 feet is effectively double what most people's movement speed is in the Essence20 system, specifically in Power Rangers. Your kind of default movement speed is 30 feet. So this is effectively a double move for a single personal power point. It's very, very nice, very, very useful. And again, if you're using lightning fast to set up whirlwind strikes, because again, you're having a hard time getting to where you need to be able to hit everyone, just lightning fast and jump to the exact position that you want to be in. Instead of having to try and get around, or if they've made like a physical wall of creatures, fine, I'll jump over them to do stuff like that. So very, very useful ability, but damn is the Yellow Ranger really, really reliant on their personal power. So many things in their kit require you to use personal power. Anyway, moving on. We jump all the way up to 18th level. You get Devastating Strike. You now inflict triple damage when you make a critical hit on target instead of normal double damage. That's a big deal. That's a very, very big deal. Where did my mouse go? There it is. Come on. Really? Now you're going to pause on me? Thank you. So yeah, I was just checking. So I mentioned before the idea of crit fishing and stuff like that is something that can happen in Essence20. And normally you just do the damage that you did again. That's it's specifically talked about in the combat section, is you get to apply an additional effect from the damage, and normally it's just do the damage twice. This allows you to do triple damage. Now, this doesn't specifically say you can do 3 effects of damage. It specifically says you inflict triple damage on a critical hit on a target instead of the normal double damage. So as I mentioned before, because of the wording in the combat chapter, it just says you can allow the effect of the attack to happen again. And if you have multiple effects of the attack, you can kind of pick and choose what you want to do. This specifically says damage. But again, combine that with strike bonus. Like, strike bonus and Devastating Strike turn deadly. Because again, strike bonus at high levels gives you an upshift of 4. And Devastating Strike gives you triple damage on a critical hit. So if you use strike bonus on something that you already have a D12 on, you instantly get an auto critical, which means you do triple damage. So strike bonus now turns into 1 personal power to do triple damage. That turns strike bonus incredibly useful. Again, the only thing that needs to happen is you have to have a D12 as your finesse die, which by 18th level is 100% possible. And as long as you've got that, you do crazy amounts of damage. Because in addition to strike bonus giving you auto criticals, you also can just crit fish. Because again, if you have a specialization in martial arts, all of your attacks, when you're rolling your D12, you can roll a D2, a D4, a D6, a D8, a D10, and a D12. And if any one of those, other than the D2, any one of those rolls max, you are getting your critical hit. So now we are seeing the Yellow Ranger from Super Sentai, where they're the super strong powerhouse that 100% is in here. But you can also kind of flavor this as just being incredibly accurate if you want to keep to that speedster theme. But yeah, Devastating Strike, very, very simple explanation. Huge, huge results on how things will work. So yeah, moving on. At 20th level, you get Yellow Ranger Prime. Every one of the 20th level build uses always the Color Spectrum Ranger Prime. It's no different for the Yellow Ranger. You normally get 3 things. First, you can get resistance to normal, blunt, and sharp damage. Useful, basically physical attacks you have resistance to. The second thing you get is additional point of damage on finesse attacks. So now even your triple strike attack, which has to be effectively an unarmed attack, is now doing 2 damage instead of 1. And all your other finesse-based attacks, so if you have a power weapon that does more than 1 point of damage, well, that's doing additional point of damage. If your Blue Ranger took the grid tech ability that makes your power weapon attacks do more damage, now it does. If it did your unarmed, or I think they only had Blade Blaster was the other one. If you use the blade part of the Blade Blaster, that can be finesse, you're doing extra points. But the thing that really gets you is Yellow Ranger Prime also gains an edge on speed skill checks. Edge is advantage from D&D 5th edition. For your D20 roll, edge means you roll 2 D20s. Take the higher of the 2 rolls. The opposite of an edge is what's called a snag, and it's you roll 2 D20s, take the lower of them. So now, speed skill checks. That includes alertness tests. That includes targeting tests. And it also includes finesse tests, which is what you use for all of your attack rolls. All of your attack rolls are now made at advantage. Very, very useful. You're basically not missing any of your attacks anymore, which means you're always exploiting weaknesses. When you're doing Whirlwind Strike, you're always hitting all of them. When you're getting crits, you're getting your devastating strikes every single time. It just feeds into everything else that the Rubber Ranger does really, really well. And then it also means when you are not doing combat, but you're still morphed, because Yellow Ranger Prime only applies when you're morphed. If you are, again, in a situation where you need to do something other than kill the bad guys in a combat scene, if you need to scale a building, you can use acrobatics to do that and get your edge on that speed check. There's a lot of different things that you can do, though due to the fact that it has to be while in morph formed, most of these are going to be combat. So anyway, moving on to final thoughts. Overall, again, I'm not a huge fan of the Speedster because it really doesn't explain everything that the Yellow Ranger does, but it does fit pretty well because almost everything that you're doing here does kind of somehow deal with speed, or almost everything. Whirlwind Strike speed, extra attack speed, triple strike attacks speed, Nimble Fighter speed. The only ones that really don't, lightning fast speed. Yellow Ranger Pride, gain an edge on speed skill checks. The only ones that really don't kind of focus on speed are strike bonus, exploit weakness, and devastating strike. But it still feels like that explains the character as well as I can. Overall, the Yellow Ranger is an interesting character. Again, if Power Rangers had a monk class, it would be the Yellow Ranger, and I love monks. But the reason that I love monks is because they're a control-based class. Also, they get to punch dragons. And I find that hilarious no matter how many times I do it. The idea of you going up against a beholder or a dragon or something, and everyone else is pulling out, this is my +3 great sword of beholder slaying. These are my arrows of thunderstorm. And let's go, this is my fist of I'm going to punch you. Or this is my hand of bitch slap, baby. I find that hilarious and super fun. So in this, because of how triple strike attacks and everything in this class is built, you 100% can just be a monk and not use your power weapons at all. And just do everything here with unarmed strikes. Again, the Yellow Ranger Prime gives you additional point of damage on finesse attacks. So it's not like you need your power weapon to be able to do this. And that makes this character pretty interesting. But the thing that I like about monk class is their controller aspects. And this is not a controller. This is a damage dealer. This would 100% be a striker if we were talking about 4th edition. which again isn't bad. I know a lot of people would prefer the monk to be a striker in 5th edition. Everybody complains that they don't do enough damage. They're not intended to do damage, and it's looking like the 5.5 version of the monk is going to be more damage focused. But I like my control based characters, and this one, other than exploit weakness, this is not really a control based character. But if you want it to be, getting weapons or using just strikes that have the maneuver ability can become pretty effective, especially with Whirlwind Strike. Again, all it says, it allows your attack actions, melee attacks, to target every enemy adjacent to you. And if we actually go back to the equipment section and we look at, really? You're going to just blink at me? We look at the strike weapon, which is that. It has maneuver as one of its abilities. If we actually look at the maneuver, physically manipulate a target. This weapon can be used equally well to grapple, shove, or trip a target. So if you wanted to use the Yellow Ranger role as a more control-oriented character, you 100% can. So it's not that this character is incapable of being a controller, the kind of monk that I like to play. But it's not, none of the features are built around that. And most of the features built in here are very damage focused, which again, if you want a damage focused character, the Yellow Ranger is a fantastic way to do it. Just don't think that you are limited to that exclusively. With the different like elemental energy types and things like that, allowing you to do a lot of different things. With Whirlwind Strike, that means that you can target a lot of different creatures with a lot of different effects and become a very, very interesting character. It'll be a lot more difficult to play and require you to have a much better awareness of everything going on, but it could be a very, very fun character. So anyway, that is going to be all for me today. As always, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All those things are super, super important. In the comments down below, we always ask, who is your favorite Yellow Ranger? For me personally, I really love Trini. I think Trini was such an awesome Yellow Ranger. I was really sad to see her go. And I was also very, very upset when I heard about Toy Trang's passing in, I think it was the late 90s. But I think Trini, I mean, she was the first Yellow Ranger, and she really left such a such large shoes to fill that I really don't think either Aisha or Tanya really filled that role well. I mean, they were cool characters in and of themselves, don't get me wrong, but I never really felt that they, and maybe this was just a writing thing, I really don't felt that they got the kind of character development that Trini did, and weren't the kind of heart and emotional support aspect, the morale booster of the team that Trini was. And then when you get to the later seasons, I'm trying to think of another season where I really, really had a Yellow Ranger that I liked. I do like, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but the Dino Thunder Yellow Ranger, is it Kira? Yeah, Kira. I like Kira. I think she's really cool. And then, if I remember correctly, was it Chip in Mystic Force? Was effectively, he was the super fan, if I remember correctly. I'm trying to remember, where he was just really, really into everything and he was always excited about it. He was definitely a comic relief style character, but he was cool. But I just, you can't get better than Trini. So let me know what your favorite Yellow Ranger is. Also, tell me how cool monks are. Yeah. Otherwise, again, that's all for me today. I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.